Julian's anger was a quiet, suffocating thing. His brother had just been installed as head of the family. He suspected everyone coveted his new position. Caleb, his only living brother, acted like a fool. He cultivated a reputation for hedonism and excess. He paraded a dozen scandalous lovers through the tabloids. But Julian's gaze on him only grew colder. Sometimes he threatened to break Caleb's legs. Caleb remembered the brutal ends of his other cousins. A chill crawled up his spine. Later, after his fake death, he was captured. Julian, in their shared bed, showed him true fury. When Julian mentioned breaking his restless limbs, Caleb's heart faltered. On the mahogany desk were several private investigator reports. They detailed Caleb's many recent transgressions. One article called him a disgrace to the family name. It chronicled his drunken nights in exclusive clubs. Another witness saw him harassing a young Rhodes Scholar. He was accused of using his family's power to bully a rival son. He allegedly coerced an author into writing lurid novels. Julian sat on the leather chaise, a black leopard throw over his lap. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. Caleb approached with feigned confidence. He mimicked a childhood gesture of innocence. He rested his head on Julian's knee. He looked up with a contrived, pitiful expression. He pleaded with his brother to hear his flimsy excuses. He claimed he was not the instigator. He said he was only listening to music. He insisted the other man was the real bully. Caleb explained he was merely delivering justice. Julian's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. His right hand lifted slowly. Caleb flinched instinctively, shutting his eyes. He quickly nuzzled his face against Julian's leg. He begged his brother not to hit him. Julian's fingers closed around his neck. He admonished Caleb for his audacity. Caleb realized his own hand had moved. It rested on Julian's pale ankle, hidden beneath his trousers. He quickly let go, murmuring softly. He asked his brother if he had been eating properly. He threatened to tell their mother. Julian's expression remained placid. He told Caleb to move into the main house tomorrow. A jolt of panic shot through Caleb. He shook his head frantically. He protested that he was not ready. His lovers back at his penthouse would miss him. The pressure on his neck increased. He cried out in surrender. He agreed to his brother's command. Everyone knew Julian had a volatile temper. He was seen as ruthless and unpredictable. But Caleb saw his brother as a figure from a classic painting. His skin had an unusual porcelain pallor. Julian had a chronic illness. His body was frail, a condition from birth. As a child, Caleb was often held by his brother. He always carried the faint scent of antiseptics. He grew accustomed to the clinical smell. He even had a similar fragrance made for his pillow. Caleb had never seen his brother truly lose control. He thought the madness was just an excuse for his ruthlessness. Julian was not his biological brother. This was a guarded family secret. When their mother was pregnant with her second child, she was poisoned. A rival in the family had ensured it. The baby was stillborn. The family's matriarch devised a plan. The dead infant was swapped with Caleb, an orphan of unknown origin. He became Caleb Hawthorne, Julian's supposed full-blooded brother. There was a 3-year age difference. His mother and brother were both delicate. Caleb, however, was robust and ate more than his peers. He knew he was not one of them. He flexed his arms, feeling his own strength. He vowed he would at least be able to protect his brother. When he was old enough for boarding school, his physique grew impressively. He could easily shield Julian from view. Their grandmother joked he was his brother's shadow. All his attention was focused on Julian. He listened to him and obeyed him, but he could never truly understand him. He feared him. After realizing his own strange feelings for Julian, he began to rebel. He acted contrary to Julian's wishes. He cultivated the image of a shallow womanizer. He sought out lovers, one after another. He kept his distance from Julian. He feared Julian would discover his heart. He feared Julian would be disgusted. He was terrified Julian would learn he was not his real brother. After moving into the main house, a young assistant named Alex was assigned to him. Alex pleaded with him to practice for the upcoming charity shoot. He said the instructor had nearly quit last time. Julian had decreed no dinner if Caleb missed the target again. At the shooting range, Alex looked worried. Caleb scoffed at the threat. He felt he was being treated like a child. He held the shotgun like a guitar, playing around. At first, Julian tried to make him study finance. The numbers gave Caleb a headache. Julian relented and suggested military history. Caleb's mind was a complete fog. Julian then noted his brute strength. He decided on marksmanship. Caleb understood. Julian was testing him. He was probing for any potential threat. Caleb wondered how his latest fling, a musician named Kiki, was doing. He missed hearing him play. He noticed the silence around him. He turned his head. Julian was approaching, wrapped in a heavy cashmere coat. His presence was as sharp as a winter frost. He stopped a few feet away. His dark eyes were intense. He asked if Caleb still could not shoot. Caleb shook his head, blinking innocently. He blamed his own foolishness. A subtle, unfamiliar scent of oud drifted from Julian. His tall frame pressed against Caleb from behind. One hand steadied his waist to correct his posture. The other covered Caleb's hand on the shotgun. The proximity was overwhelming. Caleb's ears burned red. The wind blew a strand of Julian's hair against his cheek. He had no idea when the shot was fired. Julian's cool lips were near his ear. His warm breath was a ghost of a touch. He asked what Caleb was thinking. Caleb stammered, unable to answer. He turned and fled. He wondered why his brother's scent had changed. He also felt that Julian's body seemed stronger. On the way back to his room, he ran into Leo Vance. He had met the brilliant scholar last year. He had helped Leo's ailing mother. He asked about her health. Leo confirmed his mother was well, thanks to Caleb's generosity. Leo Vance was tall and carried himself with a gentle confidence. He mentioned his mother had a gift for Caleb. His mother often embroidered small gifts as thanks. He pulled a small vial from his pocket. It was a sample of a new cologne. The label showed a green bamboo design. Caleb took it and sniffed. His eyes widened in a smile. It was the scent he remembered. The pure, clean smell of his brother from long ago. He thanked Leo profusely. Leo watched him, a small smile playing on his lips. From a shadowy corner, Julian watched them. His face was half hidden in darkness. His dark pupils were like a deep, cold abyss. After that day's panicked escape, Caleb was even more cautious. But his brother became increasingly busy. A hurricane ravaged the Gulf Coast, disrupting supply chains. Reports flooded Julian's office. The study light often burned until dawn. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier each day. Caleb saw an opportunity to appear dutiful. He could show he was a fool, but a caring one. He put aside the paper plane he was making. He personally carried a food tray to Julian's study. The family butler, Arthur, saw him and smiled. His eyes lit up. He whispered that the master had just been in a foul mood. Several executives had been dismissed. Arthur said Julian was suffering from a headache. A pang of worry hit Caleb. He asked if Julian had eaten. Arthur sighed and gently pushed the door open. He explained that Julian had no appetite. He said Julian had been eating very little lately. He urged Caleb to persuade him. The study was dimly lit. Julian was slumped in his large leather chair. One hand supported his forehead. His brows were knitted together. His thin lips were a bloodless line. He looked thinner than a few days ago. Caleb felt a pang of heartache. He lightened his steps. He told Julian their mother had sent some fresh macarons. He encouraged him to try one. Julian slowly opened his eyes. They were clouded with exhaustion. Caleb urged him to taste how sweet they were. He opened the box. He picked up the most delicate rose macaron. He held it to Julian's lips. Julian's gaze fell intensely on his fingers. His throat moved slowly. Caleb wondered why he wasn't eating. He worried Julian thought he had poisoned it. He swallowed nervously. Julian did not open his mouth. Caleb's fingers, holding the pastry, began to stiffen. He expected a reprimand for his forwardness. But Julian suddenly sighed, a sound light as a feather. Yet it landed heavily on Caleb's heart. He turned his head slightly. His voice was hoarse. He simply said, "Headache." The word was a key. It unlocked a long-forgotten memory. When they were young, during stormy weather, his illness would flare up. He would lean on Caleb just like this. He would close his eyes and whisper Caleb's name. He would say he had a headache. Caleb would then clumsily massage his temples. His body moved before his mind could react. He put down the pastry and wiped his hands. He moved behind Julian's chair. His fingers touched his temples with tentative care. He felt Julian's cool, tense skin. His heart leaped. He knew this was too intimate. He immediately tried to withdraw his hands. He planned to cover his action with a foolish joke. He started to laugh nervously, but Julian's low voice cut him off. He was ordered not to move. The command held a hint of dependence. Caleb froze, his fingers hovering. Julian uttered another single word. Press. The command was absolute. He then slowly closed his eyes again. His thick lashes cast a shadow on his pale skin. Caleb held his breath. He applied gentle, steady pressure. Julian's furrowed brow slowly began to smooth out. Something slammed into Caleb's heart. Since understanding his feelings, he had avoided his brother. He had suppressed his dark desires. But being this close, his heart refused to obey. Time seemed to stand still. Only their quiet breathing filled the room. The hurricane disaster in the south eventually stabilized. This was due to Julian's rigorous oversight. The tense atmosphere in the house also eased. Caleb's recent good behavior seemed to relax Julian. The threatening look in his eyes had softened. Their relationship seemed to find a temporary peace. After dinner, Alex approached him with a secretive air. He relayed a message from the master. Julian requested his presence at the indoor spa. Since that day in the study, Julian often summoned him for head massages. But this time was different. The spa was Julian's private sanctuary. His stomach fluttered with anxiety. He went anyway. The vast, steam-filled room was silent. Only the swirling mist and his own racing heartbeat were present. Julian was leaning against the edge of the heated pool. His back was to Caleb. His long, dark hair was wet. It spread across his broad, smooth back. The dim light outlined his powerful shoulder blades. His lean waist was partially obscured by the rippling water. The sight of his back alone was intensely aggressive. It held a fatal, predatory allure. This was completely different from the pale, slender brother he remembered. The strange scent of oud seemed stronger here. It filled the humid air. It invaded his senses and scrambled his thoughts. Julian's cool voice cut through the steam. It was laced with a watery languor. Yet it still held an undeniable authority. He asked why Caleb was just standing there. Caleb's throat was dry. His voice cracked when he addressed his brother. Julian's next 2 words were simple and forceful. He told Caleb to come over. They hit Caleb's heart like a stone in a pond. He moved forward like a puppet on strings. His steps felt unsteady. The closer he got, the stronger the impact. He felt like he tripped on something unseen. He fell into the pool with a large splash. Julian seemed to have anticipated it. His hand shot out, grabbing Caleb's waist. He steadied him in the water. Caleb's face was directly in front of Julian's collarbone. His eyes slid downwards uncontrollably. The water rippled. The light flickered. He saw the lines of a firm chest. He saw the submerged contours of a powerful abdomen. An inexplicable heat rushed to his head. He let out a muffled groan. He instinctively covered his nose. He felt a warm, sticky fluid between his fingers. Blood. He had a nosebleed. An immense wave of shame and panic washed over him. He was doomed. Staring at his brother bathing and getting a nosebleed was a death wish. He fumbled, looking for something to stop the bleeding. He dared not look up at Julian. He could not look down either. He wished the ground would swallow him whole. A very soft, amused chuckle echoed through the mist. Caleb froze, still covering his face. He ignored the blood seeping through his fingers. His face burned with humiliation. He had to maintain his persona. He bit his lip and spoke deliberately. He blamed Julian for keeping him locked up. He claimed his pent-up desires were the cause. Julian said his full name, Caleb Hawthorne. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the steam, carried a cold, terrifying scrutiny. He asked if Caleb was this attentive with his other lovers. Did he watch them with such passion? Caleb was stunned. Before he could speak, Julian's tone shifted again. He asked why Caleb was so attached to the cologne vial. Why did he wear it every day? Caleb looked down. The small green vial was floating on the water's surface. He quickly snatched it up. He lamented that the water would surely dilute the scent. Julian's eyes were filled with a bone-chilling coldness. They held a barely concealed, violent fury. Caleb's mind screamed a single thought. Escape. He had to run now. He stammered an apology to his brother. He said he was unable to give a massage today. He excused himself incoherently. He covered his nose like a cornered animal. He did not dare look at Julian again. He turned and scrambled out of the room. He was a soaking wet, pathetic mess. Alex was horrified by his appearance. Caleb was dripping, with blood smeared across his face. He looked like a drowned rat. Alex frantically helped him clean up and change. Afterwards, Caleb buried himself under the covers. He felt like a caterpillar in a cocoon. The nosebleed could be explained away as dry weather. But the cologne vial, Leo Vance's gift. He remembered Julian's eyes. A cold dread shot through him. He worried Julian thought he was colluding with an outsider. He feared Julian suspected him of having ulterior motives. He eventually fell into a troubled sleep. He dreamt of being ensnared by tight vines. He struggled and begged for release. The vines only held him tighter. He awoke to a dampness between his legs. He was mortified. He yelled for Alex. He instructed his assistant to inform his brother of an illness. He claimed he had a severe cold and a headache. He would be unable to see Julian for a few days. Alex pointed out his voice was loud enough to shake the walls. Caleb told him to shut up and just go. He threw a pillow at the retreating assistant. However, he could not hide forever. Their mother sent a message. She summoned both him and Julian to her private suite for dinner. Their mother was a kind and perceptive woman. She likely wanted to ease the tension between them. He had no choice but to go. Her suite was warm and fragrant. An exquisite meal was laid out. Their mother sat at the head of the table. She smiled gently, looking between her two sons. Julian was dressed in dark, casual clothes, his expression distant. She commented on Julian's busy schedule. She lamented Caleb's troublemaking nature. She was glad the three of them could share a peaceful meal. She served Caleb a piece of chicken. She gave Julian some steamed fish. She remarked that both of them looked too thin. Caleb kept his head down, eating quickly. He wished he could hide his face in his bowl. He mumbled his agreement with his mother. Julian merely hummed in response. He picked at his fish with graceful, measured movements. But the oppressive aura around him seemed to cool the room. Their mother stated her wish for her sons to be harmonious. Her gaze shifted between them, tinged with worry. It finally settled on Caleb. Her tone softened. She told Caleb he was not a child anymore. She said his current lifestyle was not sustainable. She asked if there was anyone he liked. She offered to arrange a match for him. Caleb's hand tightened on his fork. His heart pounded in his chest. He could not let his brother know his secret. Julian was sitting right next to him. His gaze seemed to be on his plate. But Caleb felt an immense, crushing pressure. He suddenly looked up. He plastered the most exaggerated, foolish grin on his face. His voice was loud and deliberately flippant. He told his mother not to worry about such things. He claimed he was still young. He waved his hand dismissively. He adopted a roguish posture. He complained that his current lovers were already a handful. He declared marriage was boring. Being tied to one person was not as fun as his current freedom. He glanced at Julian. Julian was lifting a piece of fish to his lips. His movements did not falter. He seemed not to have heard. But Caleb felt the air around him grow colder. He straightened his back. He declared loudly that he had no one he liked. The words were firm and unequivocal. He said he loved his freedom and did not want to marry. He begged his mother to spare him. He then added that Julian was not married yet either. He asked why he should be in a hurry. A heavy silence fell over the room. His mother's smile faded slightly. She sighed with resignation. She assumed he was truly immature. Julian finally lifted his eyes. His gaze was like a blade of ice, pinned Caleb in place. There was no anger, no question, only a deep, suffocating darkness. His thin lips parted. His voice was calm, yet it struck Caleb's heart like a hammer. "Is that so?" he asked. "No one you like?" The words were light, but they sent a cold sweat down Caleb's back. Caleb forced a smile, his face feeling stiff. He asked if he looked like he was lying. Julian did not look at him again. He lowered his eyes. He slowly wiped his long fingers with a silk napkin. The action was silent, yet terrifyingly oppressive. The rest of the meal was tasteless. When his mother finally retired, Caleb nearly jumped from his chair. He fled her suite as if escaping a fire. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall. The cool drops on his face did little to calm his racing heart. Julian's final look was terrifying. He did not believe him. He did not believe a single word. Caleb knew he had to escape this situation. An opportunity soon presented itself. The hurricane relief effort was complete, but a rival corporation tried to sabotage their recovery efforts. They attempted to steal relief supplies and undermine the local populace. The family's board was in an uproar. Some argued for a peaceful resolution. Others demanded aggressive retaliation. Julian made a final decision. He would send an elite team to stabilize the region. He also needed a high-ranking family member to act as an envoy. When the decree was announced, Caleb Hawthorne would oversee the mission. Caleb bowed his head and accepted. He promised he would not fail his brother. But his heart turned to ice. This was a test. It was bait. Julian was letting him out of his sight. He wanted to see if the tame rabbit would reveal its claws. He wanted to see who would make a move against that rabbit. Then he could eliminate all his enemies at once. Or maybe Caleb himself was just the bait. If he had an accident, Julian would have the perfect excuse for revenge. He could consolidate his power in the region. The night before his departure, Julian summoned him to the study. The candlelight flickered. Julian sat in the shadows, his features sharp and cold. He stated the journey was long and dangerous. His voice was devoid of emotion. He was assigning his personal security team to protect Caleb. He stressed the word security. It meant protection. It also meant surveillance. He stared at Caleb. His eyes held a deep, unreadable emotion. He told Caleb their mother would be waiting. He told him not to disappoint him. Caleb paused, then grinned his usual foolish grin. He thanked his brother effusively. He promised to return without a single hair out of place. But his mind was already racing. This was his chance. With distance between them, he could execute his plan. It was the perfect opportunity for a clean escape. Staying here meant constant suspicion. His secret parentage could be his doom. It was better to disappear completely. Let Julian think he was dead. Then Julian could rule without worry. And Caleb could finally be free. A bold, desperate plan formed in his mind. Fake his own death. The journey was, as expected, fraught with tension. The security chief, Marcus, was Julian's most trusted man. He never left Caleb's side. They did encounter several attacks from corporate mercenaries. The situations were chaotic. His chance came during a sea crossing. Their yacht was crossing a wide, choppy channel. They were ambushed by speedboats from both sides. Incendiary devices rained down. The air filled with the sound of gunfire. The yacht began to list. In the chaos, Caleb was accidentally hit by a stray bullet. He cried out in pain. He stumbled and fell into the violent, churning water. Marcus's horrified shout was lost in the noise. The icy water swallowed him whole. He held his breath, fighting the searing pain in his shoulder. He swam downwards with all his might. Chaos was the perfect cover. His own loyal operative was waiting for him underwater. He was quickly pulled towards a hidden submersible. Meanwhile, a body was strategically placed downstream. It was similar to his build. It wore his clothes. Its face was disfigured by the accident. The shoulder wound was real. The fall was real. The chaos was real. He was betting everything on this deception. For the next few weeks, he hid in a remote coastal village. He nursed his wound in secret. News was scarce, but he could imagine the uproar in the city. Caleb Hawthorne, on a crucial mission, ambushed and killed. His body recovered, but barely identifiable. It was a perfect, tragic story. He touched his healing shoulder. He felt a sense of relief, but there was also a hollow, dull ache. He was finally free from the constant fear, but he would never see him again. It was for the best. It was better for everyone this way. He felt a pang of guilt for his mother. He planned to send her an anonymous letter someday. He sniffed, pushing away the thought of his brother. He thought he had succeeded. He thought he could start a new life. But he had underestimated Julian. He had underestimated his brother's obsession. Just 2 weeks later, the night was shattered. Torches illuminated his small cabin like it was day. The door was kicked open. A figure stood in the doorway. He was dressed in black tactical gear. He was covered in the dust of a long journey, but his powerful presence was undiminished. His face was pale, his expression blank. Only his eyes were alive. They were black pits of despair. They churned with a world-ending storm. They were fixed on Caleb. It was Julian, who should have been hundreds of miles away. Behind him stood his silent, terrified security team. The air froze. A suffocating, bloody pressure filled the room. The color drained from Caleb's face. His mind went blank. He forgot how to breathe. How had Julian found him so quickly? Did he know about the body? His meticulously planned escape was a child's game to him. Julian walked in step by step. His boots made heavy sounds on the wooden floor. Each step was a hammer blow to Caleb's heart. The rage radiating from him was a physical force. It dropped the temperature of the room to freezing. He stopped in front of Caleb. His deceptively frail figure completely overshadowed him. A cold hand shot out. It seized Caleb's chin. The force was enough to shatter bone. He forced Caleb's head up. He made him meet those burning, terrifying eyes. Caleb, Hawthorne. He bit off each word. His voice was a raw, hellish rasp. So this is your body beyond recognition. He was thrown into a black, windowless vehicle. The journey back was silent and swift. He was a prisoner being returned to his cell. Julian's gaze was glacial. It held none of its former complexity. There was only pure, unadulterated rage. It was the fury of a man whose most sacred possession was stolen. Back at the estate, he was thrown into his old suite. It was now a gilded cage. The door was locked from the outside. The windows were barred. Even a fly could not escape. The security was tighter than a maximum security prison. Julian did not come to see him immediately. The silent waiting was a unique form of torture. Finally, on a dark and stormy night, the door was thrown open. Wind and rain swept into the room. Julian entered with the storm. In the flickering candlelight, his face was terrifyingly white. He looked like a ghost. Caleb had been drifting off to sleep. He woke with a start. He stammered his brother's name. Julian's eyes were bloodshot. His lips were chapped. "Why?" he began. "Why did you fake your death?" His voice was low and suppressed. It was the growl of a cornered beast. Every word carried the weight of the storm. "Did you want a new life with someone else? Do you hate being by my side that much? You were so obedient as a child. What happened?" The accusations battered Caleb. A surge of fear and grievance broke through his terror. He screamed that Julian had used him as bait. He did not want to die. He asked what he was to Julian. Was he just a disposable chess piece? Did Julian care at all if he lived or died? He was just another potential threat to be eliminated. He shouted all his pent-up fear and resentment. A threat? Julian looked as if he had heard the world's cruelest joke. He lunged forward. He grabbed Caleb's shirt. He lifted him from the bed. His cold, calloused fingers wrapped around his neck. "Caleb, if I saw you as a threat." His red-rimmed eyes bored into Caleb's. Their faces were inches apart. His hot, metallic breath washed over Caleb. "Do you think you would have survived this long? Do you think you could have paraded those lovers around? Could you have lived so recklessly under my watch?" Caleb struggled futilely, tears streaming down his face. His words were like hammer blows. "I kept you here to protect you. I was afraid you would be used by others. I was afraid your stupidity would get you killed." His voice trembled with rage. "I sent you south to give you a chance to prove yourself. I wanted you to stand tall in the boardroom. How many of my own agents were protecting you? Did you really think I would let you die?" He suddenly released his grip. Caleb fell to the floor like a broken doll, coughing violently. "But you," he looked down at the crumpled figure. His chest heaved. "You staged an accident. You faked your death. You ran. You would rather die out there than trust me." He staggered back a step, leaning against the cold wall. He gasped for air, his face deathly pale. The outburst seemed to have drained all his strength. His red eyes, still blazing with anger, now held a deep, profound sorrow. In your heart, am I that kind of monster? A man who would plot against and kill his own brother? Caleb? That last word was a whisper. It was a broken, weary, and wounded sound. Caleb was on the floor, a mess of coughs and tears. He heard the pain and despair in that question. He saw the fragile man leaning against the wall. His carefully constructed defenses crumbled. His resentment, his fear, all of it dissolved. So that was the truth. The surveillance was protection. The mission was an opportunity. He had been protecting him all along. An immense guilt, a tardy understanding, drowned him. It was colder than the water he had jumped into. He looked at Julian's pale, pained face. His heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. Jules, he choked out the name. Using all his strength, he crawled to his brother's feet, just like he did as a child after causing trouble. He clutched Julian's cold hand, trembling. He buried his face in his brother's trousers. He sobbed uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought you resented me. I was afraid." Afraid of what? Jules. No. Julian, he said his full name. It was a desperate, final gamble. "I'm afraid of the way you look at me. Afraid you suspect me of coveting your power. Afraid one day your paranoia would consume you, that you would treat me like our other cousins. And I was most afraid," his voice was barely a whisper, "that I am not your real brother. I'm not Caleb Hawthorne. I'm an imposter." "What did you say?" His voice was almost lost in the storm. It trembled with disbelief. Caleb's words tumbled out in a rush. He feared Julian would hate him for stealing his brother's life, and for stealing his love. He said his Playboy act was a desperate attempt. He wanted to seem harmless so Julian wouldn't kill him. His fake death was just a way to get far away. He wanted to stop being a problem. "Jules, I've always loved you." He cried until he could barely breathe. He laid bare all his years of deception and fear. He exposed his pathetic, hidden love on the cold marble floor. A long silence followed. Only his suppressed sobs could be heard. Suddenly, a cool hand grabbed his wrist, pulled him from the floor with irresistible force. He was forced to look up. Through blurry, tear-filled eyes, he met Julian's gaze. The storm in them had calmed somewhat. It was replaced by a complex emotion he had never seen before. Shock gave way to a deep, profound pain. It was the fear of a man who had almost lost everything. "You idiot," Julian growled, his voice hoarse. It was the sound of a man who had survived a catastrophe. His arms tightened around Caleb fiercely. He pulled him into a crushing embrace. The hug was hard and cold, smelling of the storm. Yet it held a desperate force, as if to merge their bodies. Caleb's face was pressed against his firm chest. He could feel the violent, drumming heartbeat within. Because of this, Julian's chin rested on his hair. His hot breath ghosted over Caleb's ear. His voice was thick with unspoken emotions. "You think that's what I care about?" Caleb was frozen in his arms, his mind blank. "My paranoia." Julian's arms tightened, nearly suffocating him. His voice held a bitter, self-mocking edge. "Was never about you wanting my power. I was suspicious of those people in your life. I was suspicious of the way you looked at that scholar. I was suspicious of the vial you wore every day. I was suspicious of you claiming to have no one you love." He pushed Caleb back slightly. He gripped his shoulders, forcing him to meet his burning eyes. "I wanted to break your legs and lock you away. Not because I feared a coup. I was afraid your thoughtless head would be turned by someone else. I was afraid your eyes would never see me." A thunderclap echoed in Caleb's mind. All the lies, all the calculations, all the fears, they were obliterated in that single moment. Julian was suspicious of this, but I'm not. Caleb stammered, his thoughts shutting down. Does it matter if we share blood? Julian cut him off. His gaze was sharp as a razor, but it held a near-maniacal certainty. Who followed me around calling my name since we were children? Who made messes that I had to clean up? Who did I worry about day and night? Who protected me like a stubborn weed? Who drove me mad with jealousy and love? Caleb, he gripped his chin, his thumb wiping away tears. His eyes were fierce, his tone an undeniable declaration. From the moment grandmother put you in my mother's arms, you were destined to be Caleb Hawthorne. You were destined to be my brother, and only mine. Shame, fear, and a dizzying joy mixed together. It finally broke into a profound sense of relief and dependence. The string he had kept taut for over a decade finally snapped. He could no longer support himself. His body went limp. His forehead rested on Julian's shoulder. He was like a lost child who had finally found his way home. Fresh tears welled up. This time, they were tears of release after a long ordeal. Jules, he mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. He subconsciously used the familiar, intimate name. The arms around him tensed for a moment. Then they held him even tighter. It was as if Julian wanted to fuse him into his very bones. Julian's chin gently rubbed the top of his head. He let out a long, heavy sigh. It was a sigh of relief, of exhaustion, and it held a deep, hidden tenderness. Stupid thing, he whispered again. It was unclear if he was scolding Caleb or himself, but his tone held no malice, only a thick, possessive indulgence. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the candlelight flickered. It cast their locked figures onto the wall as one. In the canopy bed, his brother's eyes were rimmed with red. He took him again and again. He explored every angle, every position. Caleb was on the verge of collapse. He could only bite down on Julian's moving throat. He was confused. In his youthful dreams, it was his brother who was the delicate one. He begged Julian to stop. He said it was enough, truly enough. He tried to crawl away, but a firm hand grabbed his ankle and pulled him back. The fragile barrier of brotherhood was utterly destroyed that night. In its place was a tighter, more dangerous bond. It was a mutual, unspoken understanding. He knew he could never escape from his brother's grasp now. And strangely, he found this cage to be sweet. Perhaps the night's fury had exhausted him, or perhaps years of stress had finally broken him. Julian developed a high fever the next day. He drifted in and out of consciousness. His cheeks were flushed with an unnatural red. His lips were chapped and his breath was hot. Medicine was poured down his throat, bowl after bowl. The memory of his angry questions haunted Caleb. He remembered Julian leaning against the wall, gasping. He remembered the wounded whisper of his name. It was seared into his mind. "Jules, drink some water," Caleb whispered. He gently dabbed his brother's dry lips with a wet cotton swab. Julian was delirious. He seemed to sense Caleb's presence. He turned his head away, his brow furrowing deeper. His dry lips moved, forming muffled words. "Cold." Caleb quickly put down the water. He clumsily tucked the blanket tighter around Julian. But as soon as it was done, Julian started to struggle again. A cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He seemed trapped in a terrible nightmare. Pained, broken sounds escaped his lips. "Don't jump. Caleb, come back." Caleb's heart clenched. A sour pain rushed to his eyes. He was dreaming about the accident. He could not hold back anymore. He gently took Julian's hand, which lay outside the covers. The palm was still feverishly hot. Julian's fingers curled slightly. He seemed to be grasping for something in the empty air. "I'm here," Caleb whispered, his voice choked with sobs. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here." He did not know if Julian heard him, but his tense body seemed to relax a little. His furrowed brow eased. The hand in his unconsciously tightened its grip. The force was so strong his knuckles turned white. He was like a drowning man clutching a piece of driftwood. Caleb let him hold on, not daring to move. The heat from Julian's hand burned his skin. It also burned his heart. He lowered his head. He rested his forehead on their joined hands. The familiar scent of Julian, mixed with strong medicine, filled his nose. It was not the unfamiliar oud anymore. It was his brother's own clean, slightly bitter scent. He inhaled it deeply, then licked his lips. His brother smelled so good. The fever finally broke on the third evening. When Julian woke up, his eyes were still a little hazy. Then they cleared, returning to their usual sharpness. His gaze swept over Caleb, who had fallen asleep by the bed. It landed on his own hand, still clutching Caleb's wrist. A clear red mark was visible there from his tight grip. His fingers twitched almost imperceptibly. He slowly released his hold. Caleb, a light sleeper, woke up immediately. "Jules, you're awake. How do you feel? Are you thirsty? Hungry? Doctor, doctor." He scrambled to get up and call for help. Noisy Julian rasped. His voice was weak from his illness. The rebuke had no force behind it. Caleb immediately fell silent, watching him with wide eyes. He was like a dog waiting for a command. "Water," Julian ordered simply. "Oh, okay." Caleb quickly poured a glass of warm water. He carefully held it to his brother's lips. He watched him take small sips. Julian drank slowly, his long eyelashes casting shadows on his pale cheeks. He looked so vulnerable. A sick brother was an adorable brother. Caleb's house arrest was lifted. He still lived at the main estate. A rumor quietly spread through the staff. Caleb Hawthorne had been seriously injured in an accident. He was secretly brought back by his brother to recuperate. Life seemed to return to normal, but it was fundamentally different. Julian no longer hid his possessiveness. He dictated what Caleb wore, what he ate. When Caleb's wound needed dressing, Julian personally supervised the doctor. His sharp gaze made the old man's hands tremble. When Caleb tried to skip his bitter medicine, a single look from Julian was enough. He would down the whole bowl, then be rewarded with a candied fruit. Caleb tried to protest. He insisted his wounds were healed. He did not like being treated like a fragile piece of glass. Julian would not even look up from his work. He would just state that Caleb's shooting practice would be extended. Caleb knew this was revenge for his fake death. But mostly, their interactions were filled with a new intimacy. When Julian worked late, he would call Caleb over. He would have him massage his temples. Caleb would stand behind him, his fingers on Julian's cool skin. His state of mind was completely different now. There was no fear, no wild speculation. Only a solid, willing sense of belonging. Julian would sometimes close his eyes, tired. He would lean his head back against Caleb. He would let out a nearly inaudible sigh. Caleb would urge him to rest. Julian would agree, but he would not move. He would relax even more, trusting his weight to Caleb. Sometimes Caleb would fall asleep reading in the den. He would wake up to find a coat draped over him. It always carried Julian's clean scent. Julian would be sitting nearby under a lamp. He would be reading a book or finishing some work. His profile was softened by the candlelight. They never spoke of the secret of his birth again. It was like a healed scar. It no longer bled, but it had changed their relationship forever. Julian's gaze held less scrutiny. It held more of an undisguised, possessive affection. And Caleb, in front of him, could finally drop his mask. He could show his true, lazy, dependent self. He realized that once freed from the bonds of brotherhood, once they faced their darkest secrets, the vine of affection, long suppressed, grew even tighter. It grew more wantonly, and this grand estate, for him, was no longer a cage. It was a willing territory drawn for him by Julian. Love was a constant, growing vine. That winter was exceptionally cold. In the quiet room, there was only his mother's soft breathing. The crackle of the fireplace was a soft counterpoint. And then there was the small, stubborn warmth in his hand. It was the grip of another, tiny life. He looked down. He saw the small hand clutching his finger. He saw the innocent eyes that reflected only him. They were wide and wet. They only looked at him. In the cracks of his broken heart, a vine began to grow. It was cold, possessive, and absolute. He was indeed very sturdy, like a small weed forcing its way through stone. He drank milk more ferociously than other babies. His strength was surprising. Soon he could stand on his own. He would stumble towards Julian. He would grin his toothless smile and babble, "Jules, Jules." His voice was soft and sticky, like fresh candy. The staff all laughed. They said Caleb was most attached to him. Only Julian knew the truth. It was not that Caleb needed him. It was that he needed Caleb. He was the only warm thing he could hold on to. His older cousin, Richard, loved to bully him. He used the cruelest words to curse their mother. He called Julian a sickly, short-lived weakling. Julian was used to enduring it. He was used to licking his wounds in private. Until one time, Richard and his friends cornered him. It was behind an abandoned statue in the garden. Richard kicked him in the chest, which already ached. He laughed, his face contorted with malice. Julian curled up on the ground. Through his messy hair, he saw Richard's triumphant face. His fingernails dug into his palms, nearly breaking the skin. Just then, a small figure charged forward like a cannonball. It was Caleb. He had appeared from nowhere. He was like an enraged little bull. He rammed his round head into Richard's stomach. "Don't bully my Jules," he shrieked, his voice thick with tears. His small fists flailed wildly. Richard, caught off guard, stumbled back in shock and anger. "You're dead," he snarled, raising his hand to strike. In the instant before the slap landed, Julian launched himself from the ground. He used all his strength to tackle Richard's legs. He brought him crashing down. The scene descended into chaos. Staff rushed over to separate the fighting children. Julian shielded a sobbing Caleb. His hair was a mess and his lip was split. He stared coldly at Richard, who was being helped up. His cousin's eyes were filled with shock, anger, and fear. No one saw it. In the confusion, it was Julian who had tripped him. It was Julian who had slammed his head against the sharp edge of the statue. That night, he knelt before his mother. His back was ramrod straight. "Julian," his mother said, her voice trembling. She looked at his bruised mouth and the coldness in his eyes. "Mother," he interrupted her. His voice was calm, with an unnatural, chilling maturity. "Richard fell by accident. He hit his head. Caleb and I were just passing by. We tried to help him." His mother looked into his eyes. Her own sorrowful eyes for the first time reflected true fear. She said nothing more. She just waved him away wearily. Richard was bedridden for 3 months. He had a permanent scar on his forehead. He became timid and withdrawn. He never dared to approach Julian again. Caleb loved to curl up in his arms. He was like a small animal seeking shelter. His warm cheek would rub against Julian's neck. His breath smelled of milk. The cold vine in Julian's heart tightened its grip. See? Only he could protect Caleb. Those wet, trusting eyes could only look at him. They could only depend on him. Anyone who tried to touch him, hurt him, or take him away would simply disappear. He grew up too fast, like a bamboo shoot after a spring rain. He seemed to shoot up overnight. A cold irritation stirred in Julian's heart. He no longer threw himself into his arms without a second thought. He began to avoid his gaze. He used exaggerated humor to hide the emotions in his eyes. This deliberate distance only proved his guilt. He started going out frequently. Today he went to a new club. He was chasing after the star performer. Caleb stopped the car of the new Rhodes Scholar, Leo Vance. He insisted on buying him a drink. He had 2 new, beautiful lovers at his penthouse. The secret reports were like poison needles. They stabbed into Julian's ears. The jade teacup in his hand shattered. Sharp fragments dug into his palm. His security chief knelt, terrified. "Your Grace, please calm down." This small pain was nothing. Could not compare to the tearing, burning jealousy in his chest. He wanted to break his legs. He wanted to lock him away in a place only he knew. He bolted like a frightened rabbit. He fled the room in a panic. Julian looked at his retreating back. His palms still seemed to feel the firm touch of Caleb's waist. He still felt the frantic pulse. The raging beast of jealousy in his heart was momentarily soothed, but it gave rise to a deeper, more secret desire. He could only belong to him. He could only fear him like this. He could only be flustered by him. The moment his eyes met his body, Caleb covered his nose. Bright red blood seeped through his fingers. A nosebleed. For him. A twisted pleasure shot through Julian. But it was instantly frozen by Caleb's next words. His gaze fell on the offensive green vial floating in the water. The last thread of his reason snapped. He watched Caleb scramble out of the pool. He fled as if from a monster. "Fine. Very good. Run. You can run to the ends of the earth. But you will never escape my grasp." He watched Caleb accept the mission with a forced smile. He promised to return without a scratch. But his eyes held a hidden panic, and a hint of desperate finality. Julian knew him too well. He knew him like the lines on his own palm. That finality sparked a tiny, ominous feeling in his heart. It was quickly buried under a deeper coldness. Go. A bird with broken wings will eventually fly back to its nest. Or it will die on the way. Either way, he would belong to Julian. Body beyond recognition. The words echoed in his mind. It was like a blunt knife slowly sawing through his nerves. His vision blurred. A thick, metallic taste rose in his throat. "Your Grace." Arthur's panicked cry seemed to come from far away. Julian stood up abruptly. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His body swayed. He could no longer suppress the coppery taste in his throat. He coughed, and a spray of red erupted. Hot, viscous fluid splattered on his pristine suit. It bloomed like a grotesque flower on the cold marble floor. "Get a doctor. Get a doctor now." Arthur's screams tore through the silence. Julian raised a hand. He wiped the blood from his mouth with his sleeve. The movement was violent, on the verge of collapse. His vision was tinted red. Fake. It must be fake. He was so cunning, so afraid of death. How could he? A remote coastal village. A new face. A shoulder wound. His mannerisms. He could not read the rest of the report. The heart in his chest, long frozen and torn, was suddenly filled with molten rage. He was not dead. He dared to fake his death. He dared to escape him in this way. A monstrous fury burned away his reason. It was accompanied by a near-destructive, possessive madness. He did not hesitate. He traveled day and night. He was like a vengeful demon hunting his prey. The flimsy wooden door was kicked open. It let out a piercing shriek. The firelight instantly illuminated the dark, squalid room. It also illuminated the pale, terrified face cowering on the bed. Caleb Hawthorne, his wild little weed. He was alive. He was perfectly fine. He was trembling violently, like a leaf in the wind. His wet eyes were filled with tears. But strangely, there was no longer any desire to escape. Only a complete, broken dependence. "Jules, no, be gentle," he whimpered. He pushed against him futilely. His voice was as small as a kitten's. No, Julian leaned in. He captured his hot earlobe. His tongue licked it maliciously. He felt the shiver that ran through Caleb's body. His voice was low and dangerous. "You don't get a choice." His kiss was a punishment. It branded Caleb's skin. It silenced all his useless protests. His pained whimpers were like the strongest liquor. They ignited all the violence and possessiveness in his blood. "It hurts." He gripped his waist, pinning him harder. His movements were rough, meant to destroy. "Remember this pain. Remember who gave it to you. Remember who you belong to." Sweat mingled. Bodies burned. He bit his fragile throat. He licked the tears from the corner of his eyes. He branded him again and again with his ownership. "Caleb Hawthorne, you are mine. You always will be." This gilded cage could imprison the world. Could certainly imprison his little wild weed. From the moment that warm, small hand had gripped his finger, this was the only possible ending.